Thanks very much, Karen. My name is Michael. I'm an alcoholic. Uh, I think I'm unmuted. You can nod if that's the case. Good. Uh, well, if you say in San Miguel, that's where Dan and I met. I dressed up for you guys. I have a shirt with buttons on it. Uh, that's the pretty much defining line for this retired guy. Well, freedom. That's the word I don't want to forget to say tonight. I know I wouldn't anyway, but no matter whatever else I say, that's the word on the banner that flies over anything else I might say. Uh, and then I thought about, by way of introducing myself, some things I've done the longest in my life. For a few days short of 78 years, I've been alive. Uh, for 58 years, been married to the same woman. You can do the math and see what age we were. Um, For 54 years, I've been a father. For 50 years, I've been a different kind of father. I'm an Episcopal priest for 50 years now. For 36 years, I've been sober and in recovery in this program and fellowship, thanks to all of you and all of the others I've known through these 36 plus years. We'll see how long. I sort of set, I did set the timer and then I didn't start it, which, there's an old Seinfeld bit where he talks about the rental agency that lost his car. He said, anybody can book the car. You've got to hold on to the car. Anybody can set the timer. You have to start it so that I don't think I'll devolve into too much drunk-a-log. We'll see. I had my first real drink when I was 14, 15. A friend came over, we were going to play tennis, and I can't remember if the idea was to drink first or whether we were getting together and play tennis. And then I said something like, "I've got a great idea." And we got into my parents' liquor cabinet. That's much too grand a term. It was just a little cupboard. And drank some Gordon's gin. It was also my first lie about drinking because later on that evening when my mother came home, she said, "Well, did you have a good time drinking?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And just lied right to her face and didn't fool her for a minute, I'm sure. So I didn't have much other opportunity until high school. And then here's the way I usually say that. And then I did what all the kids did. We got somebody to buy beer or booze for us so that we could drink. And that's not what all kids do. It's the kids that I hung out with, that's what we did. And it was never enough. I loved the way it felt, and I wanted to feel that way again. And it was never often enough. College changed that. It was much more readily available and really settled into drinking and uh, other things, starting to have some consequences like not going to class, but I went just enough that I made it through that 4-year career. Halfway through, I got married. My wife and I got married. And after a year of marriage, she said, I'd said at some drunken party we'd been at, well, I'll go to church because I hadn't been doing that and thought it was fine for other folks, but never thought it was anything for me after about a 2-year hiatus. And then after we'd been married a year, she said, well, you want to go to church? I said, yeah, we can do that. But at the party, I'd said, I'll go to church when they start singing Bob Dylan. And so we walked into this Episcopal church and they were singing Blowing in the Wind that Sunday. So there I was. Anytime my wife has complained about my career as a priest, my vocation, I've said, well, you started it. Um, so there we went. After college, I was on active duty in the Army for a couple of years. That's what moved me from my native Texas to Illinois, where we lived for 25 years. Um, Army was great because officers club, the booze was cheap, and I drank a lot of that. And in the midst of all this drinking, there were all kinds of, maybe you're familiar with this, embarrassing, shameful, horrible things, falling down the dance floor, throwing up at somebody's house, uh, all of that. And that continued. I went to seminary, um, and uh, sort of hit my stride there. Tried pot for the first time, um, but started to be concerned about my drinking. And there was a guy in my class, this is in Illinois, in Evanston, that we all knew because he was open about it, was in AA. So I said to him one day, Mike, uh, just wondering if I should be concerned about my drinking, how could I tell whether I'm an alcoholic or not, or whether I'm headed in that direction? And he said, "Well, you might try some controlled drinking." He said, "You might set a limit of yourself for one or two drinks, let's say for 2 to 3 months." So I chose two drinks instead of one, and 2 months instead of three, and I passed. So I convinced myself that I couldn't be an alcoholic, even though there were plenty of falling down, throwing up, all the rest of it incidents in seminary and into my first parish, but just shy of enough for anybody to speak of their concern to me. So Uh, it was 14 years after asking my friend if I might be an alcoholic, and there's only one reason. I don't know how other people do that, but there was only one reason for me to ask if I might be an alcoholic, because I knew I was an alcoholic. And but it took me 14 years to accept that. That was a that was a big night. I'd been at this little parish in uh, Aurora, Illinois, and a priest friend and his girlfriend and my wife and I had dinner together and drinking. I wound up saying something that was really offensive and got a drink thrown in my face, and kept drinking, of course. I was walking to the bathroom, little short hallway in our house, and sort of bumped into my 11-year-old son, who said, "Dad, are you okay?" That night was what I had several of these. I had blackouts too, but that night was a brownout. That's what I've come to call them anyway, where I would remember one incident or another. And it was important that I remembered that. "Dad, are you okay?" The next day I called a friend of mine, a deacon in the church, and said, whom also we all knew was in AA. I said, uh, "I think the jig is up. I think I'm going to need to do this. And could you take me to a meeting?" I think he may have been drinking at the time. He later died from alcoholism, but he was like an angel to me. He was the guy that got me to that first meeting in a feed store in the middle of a cornfield in Illinois. There were about six of us there, a couple of guys sitting on feed buckets, and and that's where it started. For me, that's where my recovery started. He said, "I'll find a meeting outside of town." And I thought, whatever. And that's where we wound up. Well, there's more. I mean, I could talk more about, I drank too much too often, and didn't do well with it. Um, my drinking was what I would call, I have referred to as, I was a periodic drunk. not a periodic drinker because I drank every day. And for the last, oh, I don't know, for a period of years, I would limit myself to a couple of beers unless I went beyond it. But I would never know. It was like Russian roulette. I would never know if that would be it or if I'd wind up getting sloppy, ashamedly, horribly drunk. And and so that was what typified it for me. I would go for days. I would go for weeks. I think even a couple of times of months without getting falling down drunk, but always something every day. Um, with that description, I'll say that somebody in a meeting, I go to 3 online meetings a week, and one of those has a monthly in person meeting as well in Austin. And somebody in one of those meetings recently said, "You know, I was kind of a high bottom drunk." She said, "But you know what? The difference between a high bottom drunk and a low bottom is about 6 inches." She said, "6 inches more to the right, I would have hit that telephone pole." And I thought, God, I just find such wisdom all the time in the program, and I'm so grateful for that. 6 inches to the other side, I would have hit that pedestrian. 6 inches, all of that. And then it becomes a different story altogether. I'm I'm grateful not only for my sobriety, but that I, by the grace of God, by the grace of my higher power, found my way in when I did. Um, and it's still one day at a time. It's not one day at a time. Oh my God, am I going to pick up a drink today? I know that's always a possibility. I talked about freedom before. I have the freedom to do that. I could do that. Thank God. I thank God that I haven't found it necessary to do that for these 36 years. Um, but it's one day at a time, living in recovery, trying to grow instead of shrink back to become more fully the person my higher power created me to be. And uh, that's a daily business. And I'm looking at some notes here. I did say I'd get back to freedom. I know that it's my higher power. I know that it's grace. By grace that I got into this program because I that I stopped drinking because I tried it on my own a lot and made promises to myself and to other people and that I would do better. And by myself, I never did that. Even when I passed the 2 month test, it was only a matter of white knuckling until I got to the other side of that so I could drink the way I wanted to. So I do have that freedom today to drink or not to drink. I love that thing about um, that drinking is a symptom of our disease, but I also love it when people say it's the symptom that'll kill you. And I know that I'm grateful for not having had to do more research in that way. And you all help me never to need to do, I mean, not to need to do that right now, tonight, tomorrow. It's freedom to make other decisions as well, to listen to other people's stories without making judgments or trying to fix them, but just to be present and listen. You know, I tell people in and out of the program that that's one of the amazing things about AA. That there's power that it's hard to imagine, maybe impossible if you haven't been part of it, to be in a group. Well, now I see there are 121 in this meeting. that, and I understand muting is one thing, but what's amazing is we mute ourselves even when we're in person. That one person talks and everybody else shuts up and listens. And yeah, sometimes while I'm shut up, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say when that person's through. But again, by the grace of my higher power, that's not often. I'm I'm really listening, really present with the person that's talking, and I know, and that's what's so powerful. I know that the people that are in the meeting, when I'm saying whatever crazy thing I'm saying, are listening to me as well. And that's healing. And that's unfathomable, how that works, that kind of healing power, but it does. We all know it, or we wouldn't be in this meeting together. I'm, uh, I have the freedom to say these days, I'm an alcoholic instead of frantically trying to say or do anything else to deny that fact. I was sober in Illinois, where I started, for about 9 years, then in Mexico for 15 years, where I served a church in San Miguel de Allende, uh, and then in Texas after my retirement for 13 years now. I've attended meetings in Canada and Ireland. We're about to go back to Ireland in a couple of weeks. It's good to be sober a while before you go to Ireland, I think. Um, but there are great meetings there. I've only been to a couple, but they're amazing because those are folks that know what they're talking about uh, when they talk about this disease. Um, and I've made friends in all those places. Um, in Mexico, a guy that you may know asked me to sponsor him. I told him I'd love to, but right now I'm at a spot where I don't have a sponsor myself. And he said, well, when you get one, let me know. And that was my motivation. And I hadn't on purpose gone for a period without having a sponsor. It just, I'd moved there, one thing happened after another. But I wanted to sponsor this guy with 10 more years or 9 more years sobriety than I had. So that got me moving to get a sponsor there. And I learned more from my sponsee than my sponsee ever learned from me, that's for sure. And I'm really grateful for that. Another thing that happened in Mexico, oh, I forgot. I went to a few prison meetings in Mexico in Spanish because somebody came to one of our groups and said, we need folks to go to the prison. So they had to put up with my Spanish and but it was a wonderful experience, wonderful experience. There were We formed a little group, this after my sponsee left. We formed a group of multi-generational sponsorship. So it was like my sponsees, my sponsor, his sponsor, and so on. About 3 or 4 at least, if not more, layers of sponsorship. We'd get together and meditate for 20 minutes. I can't remember if we read something first. Maybe we did, the reflection or something. Then we'd meditate for 20 minutes, and then we'd share, and then we'd have ice cream and cake or banana splits or sundaes. The guy that hosted us was great at that. It was wonderful. So one of those times after the meditation, we were talking about what had occurred to us in the meditation. I said, a thought occurred to me during this quiet time, um, that aside from the obvious and horrible things of killing somebody in a car accident, or myself or my family, um, or some other big external thing like that, I said, I think one of the worst things that could happen to me was if it were possible, if it had been possible for me to keep on drinking the way I was drinking. I don't think it was, of course. I really believe that the disease is progressive. But even if it were a matter of doing that for these 36 years, it was nothing less than a kind of hell. Is is it going to happen this time? Am I going to black out? What am I going to feel like tomorrow? And freedom from that is maybe the greatest freedom of all. Uh, I intended to say this at some point. It occurred to me now, and that is, I really believe that thing about alcohol. It's cunning, baffling, and powerful. And what a friend of mine, or you've probably heard too, adds to that, and patient. I really believe that I could do all that again, only it would be worse. But also just the hell of the existence I had for those, however you want to count them, 25, 26, 28 years of drinking. Um, and uh, that landed in a right spot with the guys that were at that meeting. And they said, yeah, hadn't thought about that. Just living that way again, or still. Um, well, let me talk about what's happened a bit since I sobered up. About my kids, I think I mentioned them. I mentioned my son before we started. He's 47. Our daughter is 54. Uh, Ben is was ordained years ago as an Episcopal priest too, and he's now doing his PhD in psychology in, as I told Barbara, Apple Valley of all places. Um, and our daughter is here, and I cheat by saying I live in Austin. I live in Pflugerville, Texas, with a P at the beginning of it, but one street over is Austin from where we live. Um, I retired 13 years ago and moved back to Texas, which is something I thought I would never do. Uh, but our daughter moved up here with her son uh, to teach. My mother in law, my wife's mother, was here, and it seemed clear it was the thing to do. So we moved here, bought a smaller home, uh, lived there for 4 or 5 years, lived in the same town as our daughter and grandson, her son. Our son lived in South Austin with his wife. Um, After about 4 years, our daughter was over one day and we were talking, and we said, this is kind of silly that we run back and forth to each other's houses. I think I like to take credit for this, but I really don't know who brought it up first. And we all just sort of said, maybe we ought to get a house together. And we did. Uh, we bought the house that we're in now together. And about 3 or 4 years ago, about 3 years ago, it's when our son started this doctoral program. But before he started, he said, the way I can make this work financially, if I mean, with all of the proper preface to this conversation, you have that space that's upstairs. I wonder if we might live there while I'm doing the doctoral program. And so that's what we did for 8 years. My daughter's, I don't believe it. She said it's 8 years, but I got to believe her that we've been in this house together. For 3 of those, our son and daughter in law have been here as well. And daughter in law is coming back after settling him out there in California and stay with us this year until he comes back to begin a practice. So I go into all that family sort of lore by way of saying it's not a matter of I don't think it would be this way. There's no way that it would be this way had I not gotten sober, had I not found this fellowship, had I not found people who could listen to me when I was hurt and complaining and listened to me when I was celebrating and delighted. And I've grown more spiritually in the program than at any other time in my life. Um, I say that thinking about it, giving it real consideration. I've never stood in the pulpit and said, "My name's Michael, I'm an alcoholic," but I've never said, "I'm a member of AA," because we don't do that, right? But in our little study group of 8 to 10 people on a Sunday morning, well, not only they, all of them know it. It finds its way into it. You all find your way into my conversations and into my sermons and into whatever study we're going about doing, because this is where I find spiritual depth and openness and growth that I don't find the equal of anywhere else. I'm not saying better than, worse than. I'm just saying that um, there's nowhere I find it more than here. Uh, I talk to my I talk to those folks. I talk to my daughter and my friends about AA along the lines of, um, drinking is just the price of the ticket to get in. It's a pretty high price for some folks, uh, higher for some than others. But all that is to begin the growth that we all share here. Um, and I'm grateful that I'm not having to spend all of the energy that I used to spend in hiding it, denying it, making up excuses for it, uh, suffering on account of it, and all of that. I have that energy and that all that was involved in that available to me now because of being freed from all of that. Um, I, I don't know what more to tell you all. I mean, there are lots and lots more details, but the fact is that, and I don't want to sell you short. And let me see what we're doing here. Um, Sometimes I'll say things in conversation or in a sermon like, I'll find a way to say, what you think of me is none of my business. That's just something I heard in AA for the first. I mean, that's where I first heard that. There's a bunch of stuff in AA that we say that the rest of society catches up with us a little bit. Like, holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other guy to die. But you say that in front of people that aren't in the program, and they go, wow, because because the truth of it is undeniable, that we think if I'm just bitter enough, that the other person, and boy, not having to spend energy in that direction is such a gift. The whole program's a gift. I've made uh, I've made friends through the program that know more about me than just about anybody else in the world, and I'm grateful for my sponsor now. Oh, that's what I wanted to talk about. My sponsor I got right after I retired when I moved to Austin uh, was a guy about maybe 8 to 10 years older than I. It is possible, and about that many years more longer sober than I. And I mean, oh, we got to be very, very close. He died about 3 years ago, and I still miss him terribly. His daughter is in the program and was one of the founders of my home group. So was he. And so I needed to look for a new sponsor. My sponsor now is a guy half my age, uh, uh, you know, uh, who's a brainiac at the university and who's a bright, feeling, um, level-headed guy from whom I learn so much all the time. Um, Let me look back and see if there's some big thing I skipped that I didn't want to skip in talking with you. Um, I can use as this is about four some sermons worth for me. I mean, that's about how long my sermons are. So, so when I was asked to do this a few days ago, I thought, God, I, when people talk about fear of public speaking, I think, what are you guys talking about? I mean, I do that every Sunday, but it's different because I do it in bite-sized pieces. And so preparing for this, I thought, oh, how do I hold forth that long? Well, I have for about as long as I can. And I'm happy to respond to any questions anybody may have or listen to anything that you all may have to say. I'm just I'm I'm grateful that Dan asked me to do this, and I'm grateful to be with all of you this evening. I'm amazed at the strength of your numbers. That's very impressive, and I I've never I've never been a participant for very long in very large groups, but it's really wonderful to see the strength of all of you guys, all your faces, and all of your sobriety. We did at a party one time in San Miguel. It was celebrating somebody's 20th, 25th year. We said, "Oh, let's see how many years of sobriety there are." There are probably 40 of us there, 30 or 40 of us there, and we had hundreds of years of sobriety among all of us, and it was a wonderful experience. Another experience I can talk about is going with Dan Cotter to San Antonio. It was the 50th, I believe, international convention, 50th anniversary of the founding of AA in San Antonio. And I've only been to one other, but it was so moving. We were in, yet it's not easy to find a place to have a convention for all of us because we're the size of not a small town, a pretty medium sized town. And we took over San Antonio. And at our closing ceremonies, I remember our standing up and then sitting down by number of years. How many have this many years? It was really moving. And we said the Our Father together. Also, it brought chills. And there were people from all over. I know some of you have been to those as well, and flags from all over the world and people representing the results of a couple of guys now 65 years ago or so, saying, I think I figured out a way to stay sober. And they didn't. Their higher power revealed to them a way to stay sober. And from the two of them, it's grown to pretty incredible proportions these days. And I'm very, very happy to be one little cell in this huge body that reaches all over the world. And through time, all those folks that have gone before us and all the ones that are yet to join us. And I'm just feel it's an honor to be part of this world changing fellowship. I think that's all I've got, Karen, unless somebody else has something they want to know.